Hello and welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. I am Brandon Tessers. I'm a licensed therapist, but this is not therapy, and I'm fidgeting with my beard because I am StreamYard for some reason doesn't mirror the image like I'm used to on Zoom, so now it feels like it's all like asymmetrical, which it is, and that doesn't need to be a problem, but it bothers me. Welcome. This is the This Is Not Therapy Hour. This is just an open conversation. I don't remember what parts I said. I'm Brandon Testers. I'm a licensed therapist, but this is not therapy for very many reasons. It's just an open conversation. Questions, answers, talking back and forth, responses, just like anything else. For those of you who are here, thank you. For those of you who are watching after the moment, thank you. I would love to hear. I got to like set something up. I'm trying to remember to set something up so that people who watch it not live, because I know a lot of people can't make it at this time live, but who would like to ask questions or throw things out there, we got to establish some way to do that kind of in between. I'm going to make a note to myself to do that because I will likely forget if I don't make a note to myself. I will likely forget even if I do make a note to myself, but it's less likely. Thank you for being here. And if you are here live, I really appreciate those of you who are in the chat because then, as opposed to just responding to my idea of you and who you might be, I get to actually see and read what your actual thoughts and questions are. I don't have to make guesses, which is much more draining, just generally in communication. If you find communication draining, because nobody finds it draining across the board, or at the very least, I could say nobody finds all communication exactly the same level of draining across the board. At minimum, there's more draining and less draining. But I feel pretty confident saying that some people, that everybody has at least some contexts in which theoretically, with the right people doing the right things, it's not draining to communicate. The more draining it is, it's quite likely that you're doing a lot of predicting, making guesses about what the other people are thinking, what the other person, how they might respond or be impacted by whatever you say or do, and therefore changing what you're about to say or do based on that, so that they would. That is it's draining, and it's important, and it's good to do it when it's important to do, but you should also not be having only social interactions where it's important to do that. There's got to be some where you feel safe to just say what you're thinking. Anyway, put a little aside there. Communication between streams with asynchronous viewers. Yeah, this is an open conversation. The things that I say and do theoretically will impact you if you're observing this, paying attention to any element of this on any level. The things that you say and do will impact me. Of course, like I said, being in chat gives you more specific control over that impact. Not perfect, but a lot more than me just making my guesses. Uh, every week I pick a topic for us to discuss, or at least for us to start discussing. I cannot get over this asymmetrical beard thing, man. It bothered me. Ridiculous. Uh, I pick something to just get going so that there's not quiet space waiting until somebody jumps in. But no matter what we're talking about, we can go anywhere we want to go. Those of you in chat, whatever you ask, whatever you say, we'll go where we go. If you're on Facebook, any comments you make will be listed under your Facebook account. On YouTube, it'll be under your Google account. And on Twitch, it'll be under your Twitch account. Just keep that in mind. I try not to read off. Oh, I meant to think about that too. I try not to read off the names. Does it matter? Yeah. That's my dad saying the asymmetrical beard thing. That's probably where I get the genetics for that. Asymmetrical. I try and shave it the right way, but it doesn't work. Doesn't matter to say people's names. But for now, I try not to say people's names, except I just did for my dad, I guess. Sometimes I think, I'm like, oh, maybe it would be embarrassing if people knew that my dad was the person making that comment. And as soon as I think it might be embarrassing, then I'm like, I want to say it out loud just to make sure. That's the way for me to be most certain that I'm not hiding something because I'm embarrassed about it, is to just say it out loud. But generally speaking, I try not to say people's names when I'm reading comments. although they are saved under the videos when they become videos on demand. So I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad, Dad, that you're here specifically in the chat. I don't know who else might be. And I'm happy to start talking about some things I've been thinking about, but also, Dad or whomever, throw something out to me. I don't know. I kind of feel like responding to somebody following a question. But while I wait, just in case there isn't a specific question or anything, I've been thinking a lot lately. I'm in the middle of training, not in the middle, towards the beginning of training 6 new executive functioning coaches. We're 4 weeks in, well, 3.5, I suppose. This is week 4. We had our first meeting of the week yesterday. And so I'm thinking a lot about intervention design, which is the part that people are mostly asking about usually. It means how we come up with ideas of what might help somebody to be able to do whatever it is that they're trying to do, right? If you're struggling to get yourself to work on your art as much as you want to be working on your art, yes, we do all this, we talk, we're in session, we communicate, and it's authentic and all these things, but it's all aimed at coming up with some actual things that you can try in order to make changes so that you can start working on your art the way that you want to, or so that you can change what you want to come more in line with what it is that you're already doing, but to decrease that distress. And it's difficult for me to talk about that stuff, intervention design, because no joke, it's individualized, right? Like I don't reuse the same interventions. There are some that, I'll pull some version, like energy management, for example, is something where I've got a lot of things under that umbrella and I might pull something from that. But even in those cases, we still want to make it unique to the person. It can't be done. What I'm trying to do can't be done in a different way than that. It can't be done with a list of pre-made interventions, because that decreases the amount that you actually need to pay attention. You only need to pay attention closely enough to find out which of the pre-made interventions I have is going to be the best suggestion for you. So it's difficult because it feels sometimes as though people are looking for, but how should people do a calendar? And there's just not I'm not like being coy or withholding. There's not an answer to that question in a general sense. Even for an individual, I can't say this is how you should use a calendar. We can come up with, okay, here are the elements of what a calendar is and why it's theoretically useful and how it might be, impacted by certain things about you. But then we still also need to look at, what are you trying to accomplish by using the calendar? What are your resources, your context, your circumstances? What are things that your brain prioritizes and deprioritizes in terms of attention, and et cetera, et cetera. There's just not an answer of how should a person theoretically, not even how should a person with ADHD or how should a dyslexic person or whatever. There's no broad answer for that. So I give frameworks and the big, like, general, I've said it a million times on this stream, I'm sure. You ask general questions, you get general answers. You ask specific questions, you get specific answers. And it's not that specific is better than general. General just means it's more frequently applicable. And as a natural, like, intrinsic part of that, not a consequence. It's what it means to be more frequently applicable, is that it must be less specific. It must drop a lot of information. Like you can say, what's true about any day? Well, that it's a day. That's generally true. It's true of every day, but it doesn't carry a lot of information, because in order to say something that is true of every day, I really can only use stuff that I know is true of every day. Vice versa, specific, it tends to be a lot more impactful because I can carry a lot of information about that specific context, and it doesn't apply as frequently. The most specific you could get is something that only applies in one specific individual case, which means you'll be dealing with a lot of information about that case that distinguishes it from other instances. So, and when I don't have questions, I default to general because I don't know who's here. So I'm just trying to give things that are useful as frequently as possible, even if they aren't specifically and therefore like highly impactful things. That's why I'm always asking for more specific questions, because I really do like giving specific answers. You just can't do it without specific questions. I mean, I could, but I'd be picking like, here's a person that I know, or here's something I deal with, and here's a specific solution. So I've been thinking a lot about intervention design, and like I was just talking about there, kind of holding the tension of knowing what kinds of things people are looking for you to say, and then not saying it anyway. Not to be coy with the whole thing, but because if somebody's saying, okay, I have ADHD, how do I get things done? Which is a question that we get from pretty much everybody who has ADHD and comes to work with us as a therapy or coaching client, right? I need to get better at just getting things done. Well, I can say stuff. I really can. And that stuff may or may not apply to you, meaning it may or may not be a fit. It may or may not be something you're even capable of doing, have the access to the resources necessary. Even if you are, it may or may not work for you, work well for you, be consistent for you, etc. And the danger in that is if I answer that question as though there's a definitive answer, well, a lot of the people who, in this particular example, I mean, this is true of everybody, all of the neurodivergent people, certainly who are here, but generally true of everybody. But to keep going with this specific example is by the time somebody has gotten a label of ADHD, either they or somebody else has noticed some pattern of symptomatic behavior or problematic experiences or undesirable experiences that necessitated or warranted or made it seem worthwhile to explore that diagnosis, right? Which means that that person's already been through a lot of trying to do things the way that everybody does it, and it doesn't work. We would never look at somebody who's never experienced a problem with anything related to ADHD and say, yeah, that person probably has ADHD. How would you come to that? It might theoretically be true, but how would you come to that conclusion if there wasn't any actual lived experience of things not going the way that that person or the people around them would want them to go? So there's already been an experience of this is how everybody else does it, and it doesn't work for me. And that usually causes a lot of distress. Oftentimes, hopefully, part of what getting an ADHD diagnosis does for a person then is to reduce some of that distress, to say, oh, okay, now I understand why the things that everybody else does don't work for me, or why I struggle with them, or whatever. And then if they start looking for, okay, so what do people with ADHD do? And we start giving them answers there, and those also don't work, all that distress comes right back. In fact, it's probably even worse. Nope, you thought your ADHD explained it, but it turns out other ADHD people do it in this way, and that way doesn't work for you either. So either it's not the ADHD and you are just making excuses like you were always worried you were, or you're so bad, severe, whatever, that even things other ADHDers do, you can't do, and it won't work for you. Either way, it's a pretty terrible experience. There's of course a constant temptation to just say, nope, here's the best way to make a calendar. Here's the best way to take notes. And if I had to, like if I was in a hypothetical scenario in which I had to give a specific suggestion without any specific knowledge of who it's for or whatever, I have things that I would pick because they're my highest, like, I think it's most likely that this would work, right? Like if somebody is tired and wants to change their sleeping habits in order to try and be less tired, I wouldn't in real life, in regular data, how I do this, I wouldn't say, well, you got to sleep 8 hours, because people are different. But it is much more likely that a person will do better by sleeping for about 8 hours than that a person will do better by sleeping for about 5 hours. So if I had to guess, I know which one I'm going to guess. But I don't want to make those guesses. I think it's potentially harmful to make guesses. Maybe not. Which is why the solution for me in this stream and just generally, like when I do presentations and podcast appearances and things like that, is to answer specific questions, because that way I can give specific ideas, but within the context of it is a specific idea that may also be helpful to you, but it was designed for this specific context. So if it doesn't help you, it's not because you're broken or weird or bad or whatever. It's just because it was designed for this specific context and yours is different and it didn't work. Which is why I come back to give me specific questions. But we can talk some generalities, although I'd like some guidance even on that. Otherwise, I'll go real generic. So we'll start with this. When you're trying to come up with ideas of what to do, make sure that the question you're asking is what's worth trying, not what will work, what will help. Certainly not why is the problem a problem? Why is this happening? What has caused it? All of those questions are good ones to ask. They are unanswerable. You cannot know what will work, what will happen. You cannot know why a thing is happening or what is causing something to happen. It's useful to ask those questions because you explore things in attempting to answer them that become relevant, or at least can be relevant, to the question that does matter, which is what's worth trying. So again, let's go with tiredness. I'm tired all the time, right? If that's the problem that you're dealing with, I'm tired all the time, the question is what's worth trying? What can I try that might help with this? If I get focused on what will work or what will happen, I'm probably going to be thinking a lot for a long time before actually doing anything, because I'm trying to get a level of certainty that is it's impossible to get 100% certainty and actually be correct. People are 100% certain all the time, but that doesn't actually mean that they're right. You know what I mean? And if you're 100% certain and it doesn't work out, it feels worse. The more certain you are, the more effort you've put into thinking about, okay, I could do this, blah, 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 blah. Finally, I've arrived at, this one. I think this will work. The more effort you put in to get to that point, the worse you'll feel if you try it and it doesn't work. What we want is not a lot of thinking to come up with the perfect solution and then enacting it. What we want is the bare minimum level of thinking necessary to come up with something that seems like it might work, seems worth trying, and then trying it. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, great. Take the information you got from that trial and go back to the drawing board. You wouldn't have come up with that idea if you knew it was going to go that way. So there was something you didn't know that now you know, and you come up with something else. We want the cycle between designing an intervention and implementing, testing that intervention to be very fast. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that we're asking the only question that is actually important: what is worth trying? All that other stuff is important, because what's worth trying in terms of I'm tired, what's worth trying to try and rectify that? Well, of course I'm going to say, well, why am I tired? Because I didn't sleep well enough last night. And this is not about accuracy. That's an accurate answer, theoretically, in this hypothetical situation, right? That is part of what contributed to the tiredness. But it's not the only thing that contributed to the tiredness. And it's definitely not the only thing that could be addressed in order to change the tiredness. So if I'm saying, why am I tired? Because I didn't get enough sleep, then the only solutions I can come up with to try moving forward are solutions that will enable me to get more sleep. And that's, again, okay, except what if I can't come up with anything? I can't get more sleep because I've got to be at this job until this point, and the fastest I can get home is here. And then I go right to sleep, and it takes me half hour to blah, blah, blah. And then I got to be up at this point to go do this thing. There's not a way to get more sleep. And then I'm just resigned now. I guess I'm just going to be tired. There's nothing to do. There are other things that you can do that may work. But if we look at why as though we can answer, this is the only cause, it's the amount of sleep, that's the only thing that caused it and the only thing that can be changed, we're very, very limited in what things we can try. And especially because those things, any answer you come up with to the question, why is this happening, is likely to be, if not the most obvious variable involved in the problem, probably pretty close to the most obvious, or why would that be your answer? You've already asked why, you've come up with an answer that's an obvious one to you, which means you've already probably thought a lot about what you could do within the context of that answer, like under the umbrella or the category of that answer. You've already thought about it a lot and tried a lot, and it hasn't worked. And so if you continue to work in there, really most things that you come up with, either you're going to say, no, I considered that and I don't think it'll work because blank, or I considered it and I tried it and it didn't work because blank, or If somebody puts out something that you haven't considered in that category, then you're going to say, well, I didn't consider that, but that's because it wouldn't work because blank, blank, blank. And of course, there are exceptions to all this, but we're talking generalities. So why is useful? Why? Because I didn't get enough sleep. Then I go say, well, what's worth trying next, and run it through. And if I can't come up with anything that's worth trying, then I got to go back and say, okay, why? Sleep is a part of it, maybe even the biggest part, but why else? Let's imagine a scenario in which I slept last night the exact same way that I slept, but I wasn't feeling tired. What other variable could I have changed? And sometimes it's actually really funny, but helpful to come up with some potential solutions that you know are not good ones. Maybe they're not realistic, maybe they're not safe, maybe whatever. Like in this case, you could say, well, I wouldn't feel tired if I electrocuted myself or whatever ridiculous thing. Obviously not so that you then go do it, but just to kind of shake it up a little bit, to remind yourself that there are variables that you haven't looked at least in part because you've already assessed that whatever ideas you could come up with regarding those variables wouldn't work. So saying some of those out loud just to remind yourself, oh, no, there's plenty of stuff I could come up with. I just haven't because I didn't think it was worth exploring that. Because what is worth trying, right? What is worth trying also is also is involved in what is worth thinking about, what is worth trying to come up with an idea in relation to, or whatever. You are already asking the what's worth trying question. This isn't a thing that we want to teach people to ask because it's good and you should ask it. It's a description of what is happening already. It's not something you can opt out of. You come up with your ideas of what's worth trying to think about, what's worth trying to do. We just want to acknowledge that reality so that we lower the bar. Because again, there's a joke. I don't know if it's a common joke. I've heard it from a few different places, which more or less goes like, if you ask an expert about a topic outside of their expertise, they'll say, I don't get it. It's so simple. Why doesn't everybody just blank, blank, blank? And if you ask that same expert about something that is in a topic of their expertise, they'll say, well, it's not simple. It's really complicated, and we don't actually know a lot. The more you know about something, the more nuance, the more information, the more complexity, the less certainty you get. I don't have, with all this knowledge and experience and information about executive functioning and the brain and all that stuff, I don't have more confidence that something I design will work. I have less. But I have more confidence that I can try something that I'm not sure will work and be okay. That it'll be beneficial to get some information out of it, or that it's futile to try to come up with something that is perfect. As you become more of an expert on something, as you get more knowledge and more experience with something, your confidence that any particular attempt you make will have exactly the outcome you intend for it to have should go down. And your willingness to make an attempt despite that should go up. If it doesn't go that way, it's a problem. We talked about this on the stream a few weeks back. So just remember that that's the bar, what's worth trying. And that involves two elements. A, the part that everybody mostly thinks about, the value. If I do this, I think it will pay off in this way. If I do this, I think it will work. If I do this, I bet I won't be tired, right? The other side is the cost. And we do think about this, although we don't always label it the same way. Okay, what is it going to cost me to make that attempt, to try that solution, that strategy, that intervention, right? If I say, oh, well, this thing might work for you. It costs $10,000 and it's only like, probably a 10% chance or so that it'll work. That's probably not worth trying, even though there's a 10% chance it'll work. Even if something's 99% chance that this will work for you, if we could somehow have that level of certainty, if it costs too much, it's still not worth trying. We've talked in the past, odds and stakes. Two different elements of taking a risk or making a determination about what to try. That part of it, yes, what are the odds it goes the way that I want it to go versus the way I don't want it to go? What are the odds it goes the worst way that I'm most scared of? But the stakes matter too. So if you give me 50-50 odds, if I win $1. If I lose $1. I might play that game some because it's fun. I don't know, maybe but it's even chance. Like if it goes poorly, I'm going to stop pretty quickly, right? Change those odds to make it 51% chance that I win and 49% chance that I lose, win a dollar, lose a dollar. Well, then I'll just play that game forever because I know that over time it'll pay off more than it costs me. And even if I lose 400 times in a row, I can afford to lose $400 knowing I'll make it back over time. I'll just keep playing, right? But if you then take that same 51% chance you win, and if you win a dollar, 49% chance you lose, and if you lose $2, you change the stakes. Well, now I'm not playing it at all. It's important to remember, I think, because a lot of the time we'll come up with ideas of things that we're so confident will work, and with good reason. I'm certain this will pay off, but there's always some level of uncertainty. No matter how certain you are, you can't predict the future. So there's always at least a little bit. And if that little bit involves some stakes that you're unwilling to risk, it's still not worth trying that. And so this was the metaphor I used to explain this concept back before I had kids, and now I have 3, and it feels wrong to use this same example, but I'm going to do it anyway. Of if you offer me 999,999,000 out of a billion are the odds that I will win, right? Only 1 in a billion do I actually lose. And the stakes, if I win, I don't know, $10 million. And if I lose, one of my children dies. Not playing the game. I don't care. I don't care what the odds and the stakes are. If I can opt out, or I'm sorry, I don't care what the odds are if that's what the stakes are. If I can opt out, I will opt out. I'm not taking the chance of that happening and thinking that it only happened because I played a dumb game that I didn't need to play. This is absolutely relevant, especially with the pandemic stuff that's been going on lately, I mean, 2 years, 2.5 years, whatever it's been now. In terms of risk assessment, what risks are worth taking. But to put it on a different example, if my friends, I was planning on hanging out with my friends, and I have social anxiety issues, and but I like my friends, and then they decide they're going to a party that night because some of their other friends are throwing something, and they invite me to come along. So now I got a decision to make. Am I going to go to the party or not? If I like my friends, I trust them. I trust that whatever other friends that they have are probably also cool people, because my friends wouldn't be friends with terrible people. And I trust that my friends wouldn't invite me to this thing unless they thought I might have fun. So I think it's a pretty good chance that if I go, it'll be a good time. I'll have a fun night. But if my social anxiety is really bad, or whatever, rejection sensitivity, you don't have to label it. If I just know that if I go, there's a chance that if it doesn't go well, that not only will it be an absolutely miserable experience, but that I'll take the next 2 or 3 days to have to recover from it. I'll be in my bed for the rest of the weekend because it'll damage me that much, right? Then sure, 90% chance, I think. My friends are cool. I trust them. I think it'll probably work out and I'll have a good night. And a low chance that I'm going to be harmed and incapacitated for the weekend. I'm probably just not going to go to the party because there are other things I can do to have a good night that don't carry the same level of risk, right? So when you're coming up with ideas of things to try, that's part of the issue that gets in the way sometimes. Trying to go to bed earlier tonight is a very low risk thing, right? Low stakes. If I don't go to bed tonight, the stakes are that I feel tomorrow the same way I feel today and felt yesterday. I know how to do that. That's fine. It's not a big deal. Whereas if I try some other kind of intervention, well, what if I buy a new mattress? Maybe that'll help me sleep better. If it doesn't work, I just spent, I don't know how much a mattress costs, $2,000, $3,000. I honestly don't know. However much money I just spent on that thing. So the stakes are higher. So if I'm going to try something like that, the odds, my perception of how likely it is to work, they have to be a lot higher. Again, whether my perception is accurate or not is a separate question, but I have to feel a lot higher level of confidence that it will pay off. Just know that both in terms of what ideas do you keep coming up with and trying, even though they're not working. It might be because any other ideas you've explored in that space have high risks involved or high costs, high stakes involved, right? It might not just be because you can't come up with a good idea, or you don't know enough, or you're lazy, or you're making excuses, or whatever other answer you might give yourself. And also, sometimes when that's happening, you want to look at, okay, well, even though it is a low risk thing to just try to, or low stakes thing to try to go to bed earlier tonight, the odds have changed because I've tried it many, many, many times. And so now I think it's much less likely that it will result in that. It would work if I could do it, but I don't trust that I'm going to be able to do it. So the odds that it'll work go down, which might mean that it is worth looking at something else that has a higher cost or a higher risk. Risk is a cost. Taking a risk is part of the cost that you pay to do something, to try something. And thinking about stuff is, like trying to go to bed earlier, a very low stakes failure. If you think about something and you don't come up with a solution, it sucks because you didn't come up with a solution, but the attempt to try to come up with a solution didn't harm you. Whereas doing something that might theoretically solve the problem could also theoretically harm you in some way or cost you something. So there's an inherent drive to think and think and think until I come up with something. We just want to make sure that that bar is in the right place, because opportunity cost is a cost. Meaning, if I say I'm going to go to bed early tonight, if I fail at that, it's low stakes. I'm just tired again tomorrow. The problem persists, but I've been surviving with this problem. Okay. But also it means that I'm not trying to come up with something else to attempt. So I'm foregoing the opportunity to come up with some other idea to try. And yeah, there's no way to avoid that. Any idea you come up with means you're foregoing on the idea to come up with something else. But when you're using the same idea over and over and over without the results that you're looking for, at a certain point, that cost becomes worth paying attention to. Kind of another way of saying, make sure you keep checking in on the odds that you think it'll work. And make sure, really make sure that when you're asking this, you're not asking, would it work if I could do it? That you doing it is part of the calculation of, do I think this will work? This would absolutely work if I could just get myself to do it. Great, 100% confidence, except I've tried it 40 different times and I've never been able to get myself to do it. Even if that 100% confidence was accurate, it absolutely would work if you could get yourself to do it. If I've tried 40 times and it's not happening, then it's not 100% guaranteed to work. In fact, it's a lot more, my perception evaluation of it is going to be very low percent chance that this will work because I've tried it 40 times and it hasn't worked. The why, because I didn't do it, is different than the why, because I did it, but it didn't work. Doesn't matter. The outcome's the same. It worked or it didn't. It had the impact that it had, right? So what's worth trying? Keep in mind risks, keep in mind odds, keep in mind stakes. All of this is based through perception. And I didn't use this term, but when we were talking about the exploring why, what we're talking about there is reason. We want to use reason and logic. If we're thinking about the future, we're using reason, we're using logic. We're taking information that we have about things that are happening or have happened in the past and using those and combining those and coming up with patterns to project into the future about what we think will happen next, right? So we're using logic and reason. We're saying, well, if X, in the past, X happened, then Y happened. So if X happens again, then Y will happen again. So logical thing. Just make sure that you understand that reasoning, because a lot of the time, if you get a suggestion from somebody else and you just hear the suggestion but don't understand their reasoning behind the suggestion, well, first of all, it might not have any reason behind it. It might just be, a lot of the time when we come up with things that we think are worth trying, it's really just, I think the world should work this way. I think it should be that if X, then Y. And every time X, Y doesn't happen, but it should be how it happens. So I'm going to keep trying it. That can get in the way a lot. And I forgot why I started saying that. Oh, reason. That we want to be able to explain why we think X might result in Y. And if we can't come up with a better reason, a better explanation than just because it should work that way, doesn't that feel like it should work? We can still try it. Just know that that's our reasoning, is because it feels like it should work, not because we have any understanding. If you get something from someone else and they haven't given you their reasoning behind it and you implement it, if it works, cool. If it doesn't, what are you going to do? You don't have the reasoning behind it, so you can't experiment and tinker and individualize it to yourself. If somebody says, I use this example because this one really annoyed me. I don't know if it's still popular, but it was getting kind of popular there, especially in the latter half of 2020. This early to rise thing that if you wake up at 5 a.m. every single day for 100 days, then your productivity levels will soar, more or less, is the general overview, right? But it ignores the context. It leaves out any specific differences for different people who obviously waking up at 5 in the morning is going to affect different people differently. It even affects you differently one day from another. But if we just pitch it as this is how it works, it feels, oh yeah, waking up early, that's definitely connected to productivity. And we've all had experiences where we wake up early, do some stuff early on, and then later on we're like, wow, I've done so much, and it's only 8 o'clock, because it's unusual for us to have done that much, and that's the time. So we noted it, and there's something there to connect to if somebody's saying, yeah, waking up early helps you be productive. But I've also woken up at 5 a lot in my life and not been productive at all and just felt awful. We just usually don't think about that when someone's saying waking up at 5 makes you feel productive, it makes you be productive. If I do think about that, it's very easy for me to write it off and be like, well, I did it wrong, or it should make me productive, but I'm broken, so sometimes it doesn't work for me, or whatever. If we don't understand the reasoning, then all you can do is try and implement it. And if you implement it and you try that specific thing and you go 100 days, and sure, you didn't wake up at exactly 5 o'clock every single day of the 100 days, because nobody is going to do that, whose life is structured in a way that for 100 days you can wake up at exactly the same time every single day. Like, things come up, things get forgotten, you get sick, whatever, you're going to miss some of it. And then you say, crap, it didn't work. I didn't magically become super productive after doing all that. We don't know the reasoning, so all you can do is focus in on, I didn't do it right. I missed those 2 days. That's why. I got to try and do it again the whole 100 days, no exceptions. I'm really going to do it this time. How many times have you done this with a diet, or, right, like, this will definitely work. I'm going to do it. Crap, I did it, but I didn't do it exactly perfectly. That's why it didn't work. I'm going to try it again. So make sure you get people's reasoning, because then if you try it and it doesn't work, you can say, well, okay, they thought it might work for this reason. Maybe I can modify it. They thought it might work because if you wake up at 5 a.m., then you'll be tired, and so tired by the end of the day that you'll fall asleep at 9 p.m. and therefore you'll be getting more rest overall. Or they thought it might work because if you wake up at 5 a.m. before everybody else is up and doing stuff, you can kind of just set your own agenda and do your own thing without having to worry about who needs what from you at what time. You just have the world to yourself, or whatever. If it's that and it doesn't work for me, then I can say, oh, well, yeah, because my family is all up at 5. We're all doing this together. Or, they get up at 5:30 or 6 anyway. But if I just need some time myself, what if I stayed up until 3 instead of waking up at 5? Would that work? And you can come up with different attempts based on your context. If you don't have the reason, you can't do that. I'm still just talking kind of general, but I also still haven't gotten any specific questions. Was we're trying, we want to iterate, get data, know that a failed attempt is not a failed attempt is not a failure. Actually, this might be worth talking about. Success and failure, just in general. Yeah. Success and failure, like good and bad, like, need, these are terms that only make sense in a specific context, within specific constraints. It's not that there's no such thing as success or failure. It's that success or failure can only happen within constraints. If I set a goal of by X time, I will do this thing, and I don't, I failed at that goal. Does it mean I got no benefit? There was nothing that happened in that time that was beneficial to me? No. Does it mean it is inevitable that I'll fail again if I try? No. Is it a waste? detrimental to me somehow because I'm just a fit. No, I'm talking literally about the usage of the language, not how we conceptualize it, although those two things are pretty much the same, I suppose. I'm never trying to encourage people to stop thinking of failure and success. I'm encouraging people to think about it accurately. If I'm saying, for example, I want to get stuff done, I want to be better at getting stuff done, and then every day I fail at it, fail at it, fail at it. Well, what specifically do I mean? What am I trying to get done? And within what time reference, like what constraints? Because I can literally fail to do a thing if it's that specific. But if I say, for example, I want to, I don't know, make $1 million. Well, I haven't made $1 million. That doesn't mean I have failed at making $1 million, unless I'm going to say yet. I have failed to make $1 million thus far. But even then, this is also why I use aim instead of goal. If we're looking to make an evaluative judgment like that, where there's a preferable answer, then our brains are only incentivized to get just enough information to be able to distinguish whether it was the good one or the bad one. I only need to pay close enough attention to know, did I succeed or did I fail? Which means all this data, all this information that might be useful to me goes unnoticed because different failures are different. That's why I like aim, right? Instead of a goal, which I fail or succeed, I'm going to hit the bullseye. Every attempt, either I succeed or I fail. And if all I'm looking at is it in the bullseye, yes or no? That's all I need to look at to determine whether it was a success or a failure. Then the fact that some of my failed attempts are really close and some of them are very far away, which should theoretically be useful to me so I can distinguish which things are getting me closer and closer, all that gets lost. All I'm saying is it in the bullseye? If no, it's a failure. So I miss all this information. That's why I like aim. I'm aiming for the bullseye. I have to check what happened. I have to see after an attempt what happened. How close am I to my aim? Which allows me to make changes over time. Generally, here's another way of talking about general versus specific. We all of us are incentivized to find general answers to our problems, general reasons for our problems. Every specific single thing that you have ever done, that you've experienced that you didn't like, is a different thing, which means that in order to have changed that, there would have had to be some specific different thing done each time. But that's not useful because even if I do come up with something that's specific to an instance that's already passed, I need something that can go into the future. So we have to drop information and find connections and patterns. And what's the common denominator between all of your experiences is you. So the larger and more general you're trying to make that pattern, the more likely it is that you're going to be looking at yourself as the flaw, the problem that needs to be resolved. And there's merit to that, value to that, depending on the circumstances. But if you're trying to solve a problem like, how do I just get things done without wanting to get specific about what you mean, you're looking for, I want to solve this all in one go. I want to do something, learn something, know something that makes it so that from now on, anytime I intend to do a thing, I do it. And there is nothing like that. There are things that can make it so that it works more frequently or, have a better chance or whatever, get closer. There's nothing that solves it all forever. And so we get stuck a lot of the time because we're looking for, we're very confident, oh, the issue is I blank, blank, I'm lazy, I whatever. We got some comments. All right, let me finish this and I'll read these comments. Because what a high value solve that would be. If I can learn that the root of all of my problems is the fact that I'm lazy, great. All I have to do is solve the fact that I'm lazy and all of my problems will be solved instead of a bunch of specific things. But because it's so general, there's nothing there. And the more general you get, the more you're getting into constructs and concepts that we've invented specifically to apply to general problems. So yes, they apply accurately, but only because we invented them in order to apply accurately. Not actually useful. been hearing a lot lately that things never get better. Like I'll say, I can't handle this right now, but things will be better when I finally have a steady paycheck. But then people say, ah, yes, I thought that way, but then work was always busy and something always comes up. I don't think they mean to say things will always be terrible, get over it, but that's what it feels like. Okay, yes. This is very closely related to toxic positivity, although I suppose, well, I guess it depends on the specifics of the person and why they're saying it and whatever. But this is almost kind of a backwards version, a nega version, I guess, of toxic positivity, where it's like, hey, things will always be terrible, so stop waiting for it to be better and just suck it up and do it now, or whatever it is. It's impossible to say what people mean by that every time they say it, but we can talk about some things that people might possibly be meaning. And one possible meaning is things will always be terrible, get over it. Toxic negativity. Yeah. Just what we want is accuracy, not positivity or negativity. It's not that being positive is good and negative is bad, or that positive is bad and negative is good. It's good to be as accurate as we can, and we have limits to how accurate we can be, but we want to look at, these are the negative elements, these are the positive elements, as accurate as we can be, not try to ignore one side or emphasize one side, just deal with the reality. Yeah, one possible valid interpretation is, yeah, things will always be terrible, get over it, stop complaining. Somebody might just not want to hear your complaints, or somebody might be asking you for something and your response is, hey, when X, Y, and Z is better, I'll get it to you, or I'll do that, or we'll figure it out. And they've been pushed off, and now they're saying, no, don't push me off anymore because something always comes up. Let's just handle it now. That's one possible meaning. Another possible meaning is, hey, you're trying to figure out the future and project and predict the future too much. You're planning around and you're just going to be upset when it doesn't go the way you want it to go again. So instead of waiting for that rosy tomorrow, what can we do right now to try and start working toward it instead of just waiting for it, or whatever? Who knows what any of them might mean? There's limits, right? But to whatever extent you are able and comfortable, just ask them what they mean. What do you mean? Why are you saying that to me? Or even better, just share with them, like you just did here, your interpretation. Wait, are you saying it's just things will always be terrible and so I should just get over it? And let them clarify. Yeah, basically. Or no, it's this, or nah, not that exactly, but that's basically the point I'm trying to make, is let's just not worry about whether it's good or bad. Let's get going, or whatever. Especially when an issue like this is about how people are communicating a concept to you and how you're then interpreting that concept. There's not really a way to get a clear answer on what that person intended to get across without discussing it with that person. And that's not always an option, or not always a good or a safe option. But to whatever extent it is, let's do it. To whatever extent it isn't, you can just remind yourself that what people mean and how you interpret what they're saying are two different things. Even if you got it basically right, it's never exactly the same. And even if you interpret the meaning of their words, and this causes problems, especially for neurodivergent people, autistic people in particular, even if you're interpreting the meaning of their words accurately, if you're ignoring the function of the communication, that changes everything, right? There's a lot of generally what we would call like bad faith communication. When somebody is saying something, for example, all lives matter. I don't disagree with the meaning of that, the literal meaning of those words. I do also think all lives matter, but you're ignoring the context and the function of that communication. The function of that communication isn't to remind me that all lives matter. It's to make me feel bad for saying Black Lives Matter. And it's done in bad faith, so that even if I try and respond and say, how dare you come in here with that stuff, you can say, well, what's wrong with what I'm saying? I'm just saying all lives matter. Don't you agree that that's true? Yes, I do. But that's not what the function of the communication is. So if you're noticing a discrepancy between this is what they mean, but I don't understand, like that doesn't apply, or they must be mistaken, or why would they do or say something so terrible? It could be that the literal meaning of the words is modified by the context in some way that you want to take a look at. What I mean is, I'm struggling a lot right now, and I'm just trying to get through the next leg of the race. And then they respond with, oh, but you'll always struggle. So, again, I don't know the context, but some of the ways that you're phrasing this makes me think that at least sometimes the context is people are asking something of you, to which you're saying, I'm struggling a lot right now, just trying to get through the next leg of the race. And their response is some version of, yeah, but that's never going to happen. So can you just do it right now? And I'm going to make some guesses here. And so please clarify and correct me. But it's quite likely that when you're hearing, oh, but you'll always struggle, you're interpreting the emphasis to be on the you. Oh, but you'll always struggle. You, person who's making this comment, you always struggle. You never get your crap together. You always have some new problem to deal with. You're always messing it up. When it might be possible that even if what they're saying is you'll always struggle, is not that you are doing something wrong. What they're saying is life is unpredictable and chaotic, and there's always stuff coming up for me, for you, for everybody. We can't predict the future. Even if you get a steady paycheck, maybe things won't actually be easier in the way that you think that they will. Or once you get a steady paycheck, then you'll have to be dedicating some of your resources to the job that's getting you the steady paycheck. So it's not like it's going to, or whatever. Connotations. When we're all very, I was going to say we're all very narcissistic, but I shouldn't say that, because words have meanings and different people use words to mean different things. And that one definitely has some very common usage that is not what I mean, and I don't want to detract from the way that it's used. Fundamental attribution error. You have more information about yourself, your own experiences, your own ideas than you have about anything else. So everything is translated through that lens. If somebody says to you something like, people think they can pull off short hair and they just can't, and you have short hair, you're going to assume that they're talking about you. Even though I just made up this hypothetical scenario, in that scenario, seems logically unlikely that they were talking about you, because why wouldn't they just say it to you right then and there? Why would they say something that you wouldn't like in a very poorly disguised way? But maybe they saw your short hair, which reminded them of somebody else with short hair and somebody else. And really what they're saying is you pull it off, but people think they can pull it off and they just can't. And I'm trying to communicate, you're pulling it off, but you hear it as, man, you are not pulling it off. Fundamental attribution error means that we think other people are simple, we're complex. We have a little bit of information about them and a lot about us. So everything gets interpreted through the lens of our experience. We think that people must mean with their words the things that I would mean if I used that word or that phrase. And to the point sometimes where when I'm trying to help people understand this particular concept, someone will say, all right, they want X, Y, and Z. And I say, well, what did they say? Did they say they want that? No, but they did this and this and this. So it's pretty obvious that they want it. But what if they told you that they don't want it? Well, then they're just lying. Obviously they want it, right? That we get into a place where our own interpretation of somebody else's behavior somehow supersedes their sharing about that, their declaration of their intent. If I say, all right, here's a funny version of when I was 17 years old, I went to a super fancy, cool little big boarding school in Singapore, which was lots of fun. And when I was first there, like literally the first or second night that I was there, I was up late talking to one of the people that lived in the boarding house. And they said to me that my friend, this new friend I just met, had gotten off with some girl in the pool the night before. And I was like, that's disgusting. Oh my God, gross. And their reaction was like I was being a prude. And their reaction, like I'm being a prude, to thinking that that's gross, made me feel like maybe I am a prude, or maybe they're kind of... Took a while for us to get around to the fact that getting off, quote unquote, the phrase means different things in different cultures. And in the culture that she had learned the phrase, it just meant kissing. And obviously, if she had said he kissed a girl in the pool last night, I would not have reacted in the same way of like, oh, so disgusting. Silly example, but just the point is that we use words to mean different things. We assume other people mean what we know the word to mean, unless we clarify or causes some problem. Different context, but the one I've been thinking about is my sister's trying to convince me to do things like exercise and sleep 8 hours and to make a little progress each day, which I understand what she means, but I just lost my job and I'm just trying to get by day to day. Yeah. So in this particular case, that is she's asking you to do something. In this case, she's asking you to do something because she thinks it will be beneficial to you. You're saying, I'll do that when there's a better time for it. And she's saying, there's not going to be a better time for it. Let's just do it. Right? Hilarious and very awkward. Yes, absolutely. Both of those things. That story was very awkward. Yeah. Coping is good, prevention is better. So when you're in crisis, when you're in survival mode and it takes everything you've got just to get by, that's not the time to be trying to make changes that aren't necessary. It's taking all of your resources just to get by. You don't have extra resources to spare to try and make changes about how you sleep and how you work out and whatever. Also, probably true, or at least worth trying theoretically, that if you slept better or had a different level or a different kind of physical activity, not necessarily that exercise is always good, but it can be worth trying for sure. It is a commonly helpful thing, not for everybody, but it is commonly helpful. And it is also true then that whatever you're doing, struggling to get by day to day, if you had more energy because you slept more and your physical activity was whatever, if those things actually paid off the way that she's thinking that they will, that you have more energy, then getting through day to day is easier. So there's reason for her to suggest it. There's reason for you to say this is not the time. We always want to try to free up resources first. And then we want to make sure to take those freed up resources to use them to build and change things so that things will get better going on. Nobody starts as a default with extra spare time and energy. Like nobody's sitting there with time where they have energy to do things, but they're just sitting there looking at the wall for no reason. That's not enjoyable. Certainly attention and awareness, like your brain doesn't just shut off unless you're asleep or whatever. So yeah, everybody is spending everything that they've got to get by. It is worth looking at sometimes, what can I cut? What can I give up to free up some resources? It's certainly worth looking at sometimes, what can I change so that I can accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish without spending all the resources it's taking me right now or whatever. But the trap then is to take those freed up resources and just take more onto your plate again without making changes like this, where you're building something to make it better in an ongoing way. Oh, great, I have some extra time. Now I can get back to that other project that I was supposed to be working on. Instead of, oh, I have some extra time. Now I can work on doing this thing, which will free up even more time. We want it to cycle, right? With the freed up resources, you do things that free up more resources, and which do things and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you're working on constantly, but putting on the back burner because the constant nagging in the back of my head, well, you failed to sleep and exercise again today, is not helpful. True. Yeah, not helpful. And yeah, survive and get by day to day and communicate that to her that, okay, what you're suggesting is theoretically helpful, but I've been trying and it doesn't work. It's not just about willpower, or if it is, I haven't figured out what to do about it. So unless you can tell me something specifically that will help me to do those things, it's not a helpful suggestion to me right now. So can you help me explore other things, or at the very least, just stop saying it? Because every time you say it, it makes me feel like I'm the cause of my problems because I'm not sleeping well. It's not, again, back to interventions. That what's we're trying. It's not that these things wouldn't theoretically help you. It's just that you're not able to do them. You're not doing them, whatever, how you want to describe it. They're not working. The why they're not working, we can debate about, but the fact that they're not working is observable. These ideas are not resulting in the outcome, whether it's because you enacted them or didn't or whatever. So what else might? You only are going to feel really bad and get really stuck if you don't look at anything else as though these are the only answers, and they're not. There are other answers. So say, okay, I'm going to keep in the back of my mind, because you don't really get to choose that, right? That voice is going to be there. And if it's saying, you didn't sleep well, you didn't exercise well, okay, yeah, I didn't, and I will keep aiming for that. And also, until that happens, here's the other thing that I'm working on, and that's going well, or whatever. Because also, if you feel better, then you won't really care about the fact that you haven't slept well or exercised or whatever, unless there's other benefits you're looking for from it. Remember, I don't care about accuracy. Is it accurate that if you slept and exercised, you might feel better? Yeah, potentially, theoretically, it depends, but probably, likely. Is it useful? No. So let's look for other accurate things that are also useful until we find something that's useful. Actually, somebody shared with me a saying from the field of statistics recently. Apparently, in statistics, it's a saying that all models are wrong, but some are useful. That's what we're talking about here. Any idea is limited and flawed, but sometimes it's useful even within those flaws and limits. I gotta go. Good to be with you. Thank you for some comments and questions, especially there at the end. I will be back next week, same time. Thank you.